Hello. So today we are at Ballina with the Orbex scenery in Microsoft Flight Simulator with the Carenado Cessna 182RG2, and we're going to take a look at starting the airplane up in a somewhat correct manner. So if you've had a look at the Cessna 182RG2 in Flight Simulator, you'll be aware that it doesn't come with much in the way of procedures. So if you have a look in the tablet, we can show this to you. So if we go next, next, next. So that's the checklist you get, which really isn't much. So what I've done is gone and looked up a real-world pilot operating handbook for the Cessna 182 from the late 1970s and the early 80s, and there's lots of revisions in it and pages of amendments. I've cribbed from it to find out basically, the basics that functionally we can do in the simulator. Now, I'm not going to do everything because, as you know, there's all sorts of mnemonics that you might follow in the real world to do with checking that checked all the seat belts and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stick to the things we can actually do in the aeroplane that are kind of simulated. So the Carenado aeroplanes are not study level, but there are things we can do that will make it interesting to do along the way. So we'll find our way. So just to show you where we are in the world, we're at the ground, on the ground at Ballina. We're going to fly a basic circuit. So again, as I said, we're not going to be able to do everything on the way round because it would take ages and it would get really busy and far too complicated to explain everything. So once we get in the air, we're going to actually simplify things quite a lot and just follow the route. Okay, so I'm going to use this flight as a chance to really validate the notes I've written up. So there are chances that some of this might not be 100% correct, but we'll go with it, and there'll be learning opportunities along the way if I do miss anything or if I deviate from the notes. So I'll put a link in the notes of the video to the PDF that I'm following, and we'll see how we get on. So first things first, we push the aircraft back if we need to. We don't need to today. We are facing the taxiway, which is perfect. We make sure the parking brakes are on, so I'm just going to toggle them to make sure our controls are configured correctly. We appear to have rudder and yoke, and we have throttle and mixture configured. We don't have a lever, or I don't have a lever here for propeller, so we're going to have to fish around with the mouse to grab that along the way. So you'll forgive me if I don't control the propeller as well as I might. Okay, so how do we get the aeroplane started? The first thing we do is go and check the fuel selector down on the floor and make sure it's on both tanks, and it is. And obviously before this you would have checked the fuel within the simulator by going into the weight and balances menu or during the start of the simulator to put the correct fuel in the aeroplane. So we're going to go and check the cowl flaps and make sure they are open. So the lever's down here and they are open. We are going to go and just pop the yoke off for a second. We're going to go and put the beacon on switch, or put the beacon switch to on even before we put the power on. So as soon as we do apply power, the beacon light will come on outside. So we make sure that the carb heat is in. We make sure the mixture is on fully rich. We open the throttle ½ an inch, and then we prime as required. So we'll go twice just for example's sake. I don't think it makes a great deal of difference in the Carenado aeroplanes, to be honest. Then we can go and turn the battery on and the alternator on. Now, if the outside air temperature is less than 10 degrees, then it advises in the pilot operating handbook to turn the auxiliary fuel pump on for a few seconds. So you can see the fuel pressure climb as we do that, which is another test you can make. But then having put some pressure into the fuel, that's all good. And then we can turn the key to start the aeroplane. So we go past the right and the left mags, and then both, and then hold it on start. And the engine should burst into life, as it just has, and we adjust the throttle to make 1000 RPM. Okay, so then we check the oil pressure is in green, and it is. We check the fuel pressure is climbing, and it looks like it's already climbed, so that's good. And then we can pull the mixture back to lean while we're sat here, so we don't gum the engine up while we're running at low revs. Okay, so then I'm just scrolling down through my own notes, so please excuse me. So we're going to go and turn the Avionics master switch on there. It's on the door. That's that done. Then we're going to go to the transponder and turn that to standby. And then wait for the GPS to fire up. It takes a few seconds. So it goes through its boot up and alignment with the satellites. It captures satellites. And obviously it's a fairly old system, so it takes a while to do that. It's not as fast as a modern mobile phone at capturing satellites. So while we're waiting for that, we can make sure, obviously, we've got comm radios and enough radios configured correctly. And we can go and calibrate. Oh, here we go. It's just got ready to capture. Let it get on with that. So we can calibrate the barometric pressure on the altimeter just by pressing B to shortcut that. And if we watch this really carefully and we press D, yeah, that was completely run the wrong way. So what we've done is adjusted the directional gyro to point in the same direction as the compass. Yeah, so I pressed D on the keyboard to shortcut doing that. Okay, so we're still searching for satellites over here, so I'll take the opportunity to scroll down my list of instructions to preparing for taxi. So we're just waiting for the GPS now. We don't want to move the aeroplane before it's acquired its position. I don't think it really affects it in the simulator, but in the real world it would. It would stop it from acquiring. Or it may stop it from acquiring. Okay, so we're just waiting. So, along the way, we are going to go and turn the taxi light on. There we go, it's acquired. So we can release the parking brake, and we can open the throttle gently. And the first thing we're going to do is test the toe brakes, and they seem to be working, so we'll release the toe brakes again. Test the nose wheel steering, that's all working fine as well. And taxi out to a convenient place to do a run-up test of the engine. So at Ballina, just away from these hangars for the light aircraft, there's a very convenient holding point on the taxiway which we can use away from the hangars to make some noise to do the run-up test. So again, not all of the things are simulated in the Carenado, so we can do some of the tests and some of them I'm missing out, because it's a little bit of a lottery really. Okay, so put the parking brake back on, go to a fully rich mixture now, and then we can we can test the fuel pump, make sure that the fuel pressure increases and turn it back off again. And now we're going to increase the throttle out to 1700 RPM. That's about it, isn't it? So then we can do the max check or magnetos check. So we can go for the left magneto, and we're looking at the drop in RPM from 1700. You don't want more than 175 RPM drop, and we've got about just over 100, which is fine. Then we'll try the right magnetos, and again it's not moving, so you don't want the difference between them to be more than 50. So then we go back to both, and we should see it climb back up towards 1700, and it's doing so, which is perfect. So now we can do a low RPM check. So while it's still running at 1700, we're going to pull the propeller back and just observe that the RPM does drop. Again, there's not much in the Real Pilot Operating Handbook about whether you need to reduce to 1000 RPM first. So I suspect you should. So we're going to bring it back to 1000 RPM, or the other thing we need to do actually is test, we can do this at 1000 RPM though as well, is the carburetor heat. So we're going to observe the RPM, we're going to pull the carburetor heat out, and we should see it drop further. And it is dropping further, and we push it back in, and it climbs back up. Okay. So, we can taxi further out now. We've done our run-up test. Or we've done the run-up test that we can do in the Carenado version of the aeroplane. So I'm just going to release the parking brake again, and we'll go up to the holding point for the runway. So the various tests we're going to do next can either be done at a holding point if there is one available, or once you're lined up, because they only take a few seconds. Or it's configuring the lights really, not really tests. So let's just hold here for a moment. So it's lights time. So nav light goes to on. Landing light goes to on. Pitot heat comes to on. Flaps as required. We will not need flaps to take off on a great big long runway like this. You only need them in a 182 for a short field takeoff. Make sure the controls are free and correct. Let's put the yoke back on so we can actually see them. Everything looks good. So transponder can now come to on. And we're ready to go and line up and go, basically. So again, as I said, you can either do this at the holding point just before you come onto the runway, or you can line up to do those final few bits of switching the lights on and turning the transponder on. A lot of these things are not set in stone. The order you do them in, you know, there is a broad ordering to it, and there's various mnemonics you can follow to remember the things you do and the things you check. But like I said, I'm just doing functional things here. Okay, so we go to full throttle. We're looking for 2300 RPM minimum on the RPM. We've got more than that, so that's good. We're going to wait for 50 knots and then begin to rotate. So we've got some back pressure on the stick, airplane's in the air. Now, if I'd have thought about this before I did it, and I didn't, again, this is a typical talking, doing mistake. I need to pull the course round to help me in orientation. It's just a visual aid. So during the climb you're looking for between 70 and 80 knots, and you're looking to maintain runway direction, obviously. I'm going to put the gear up. Coming up to 500 feet. If we had flaps, we would raise them at 300 feet above the ground as we accelerate. So we're just coming up beyond 80 knots, so we can increase climb rate to maintain airspeed as required. So we keep climbing, and then when we get to 1,000 feet, which is what we're going to do today, we can come back to 75% throttle, level the airplane out, trim it. We can go and turn those landing lights off and turn the taxi lights off. To be honest, this is a bit of a contentious one actually. I'm going to leave landing lights on because we're below 10,000 feet, and while we're busy talking though, we've climbed down to 1,300 feet. So I'm not doing very well at this today. This isn't my day job. So we can see the coast here, so we're going to turn left, so we're looking at the turn coordinator. So we'll lose this height over the next minute or two. Yeah, it's still climbing. Look, this airplane is so much more powerful than the other ones I've been playing with recently. So the other thing you're going to do once you're at cruising altitude is pull the propeller back. Again, I said that would be difficult to do, didn't I? So you want about 2,400. Yeah, look at it jittering. It will not let me control it. Right, let's get this altitude under control. This is one of the problems of trying to use a head tracker, trying to talk about things and trying to do all at the same time. I'm just going to descend. So I'm pulling the power back a little bit as we descend. So as we come over the town here, we're going to turn left 90 degrees. Slowly losing that altitude, there's no hurry. So align the wing on the turn coordinator again. So all of that mad scramble was caused because I didn't align the course needle. So again, it's one of the things that you would practice your procedures, and you would have things like that. All I'm using it for is a visual aid, to be honest. So we're level, so you can see the marker at the top of there. It says we're level. We're flying the reciprocal of the runway direction, and we're looking for this hill. This is a visual reference point for us on this circuit. So we'll just fly along, and we have got some time now, so we can have a look at pulling the RPM back. So you want about 2,300 RPM and about 24, I gather on the... I haven't quite got enough power going on. So about 24 according to the reference guide. So I put some numbers in the procedure book, or the document, just some numbers I found online from a flying club, flying 182s. So their own reference numbers of the combinations of power, so manifold pressure, RPM, and aircraft condition at the time, so whether it has flaps, things like that, for different phases of flight. So it's got the numbers for climb out, for cruise, for cruise descent, and for approach. It's very, very, very good. Okay, so we're just going to come behind this hill. We're getting a little bit low, so we'll climb back up to 1,000. So when we get behind the hill, we turn left. Holding the altitude until we've completed the turn at least. So we're looking for 90 degrees, turn again, so we're going 150 on the base leg here. Okay, and so now we are starting to configure for descent. So you can see over here is the runway. So we're looking to drop to about 600 feet, 700 feet, just on this base leg, and then we'll keep descending through the turn. So I'm just pulling the throttle back further. So we'll begin our turn. I usually overshoot this, I'm not very practiced at Berliner. So we're just keeping an eye on those needles, keeping an eye on the altitude still dropping, coming down towards 500 feet. Oh no, we've got it about right. But the lights aren't quite correct at the airfield here. So gear can come down. So you go back to maximum RPM, but with very low power, and you're trying to get within flaps range, which hopefully we're going to do very soon. This is all very compressing it quite a lot. So we're looking for 20 degrees flaps, which we've got. And then you're just managing power for the descent to the runway. For some reason the lights on this runway like a very, very shallow descent, which puts you into the pylons at the edge of the airfield. I know because I tested them. So anyway, the real point of this flight was to look at that startup procedure, getting it just into the air and climbing out, and doing it in a semi-correct manner. Okay, we're down. So the flaps can come up. We can pull the mixture back to lean, just a taxi. So there's a turning point in a moment. I'm just trying to sit up to see it. So yeah, that was quite instructive actually, the mad scramble on climb out, where I was trying to fiddle with the course knob while also managing altitude and heading, and it was very instructive, wasn't it? Just how quickly the aeroplane can get ahead of you, which is a really bad thing, which is why it pays to practice and why it pays to know the procedure without having to look at it. Okay, so let's just taxi back in. We'll go the scenic route again to have a little look at the airfield. I did this a very similar exercise earlier on today with the Piper Archer. But yeah, the main aim of this is really to put these notes together to guide people through starting the aeroplane up and getting into the air in a somewhat correct manner, because the notes that come with the aeroplane really don't teach you much. So it's all about kind of adding more and more to the experience, I guess. And this kind of goes half the way towards the real aeroplane, obviously with a real pilot procedure, or with real pilot procedures. you would be testing and checking a lot more things. You would be following a lot more checks at various different points along the not just getting the airplane ready and out onto the runway, but also while you're in the air you would be double checking things again, you know, running through lots of checklists. Okay, so this is Ballina, so really nicely modelled. There's a couple of aeroplanes here as well that weren't here earlier. I'll try and stay on the yellow lines and keep out of their way. It's very well done, isn't it? See people walking out towards the aeroplanes. Okay, so if we taxi around the back of the hangars, we can't get through that side. We should have had the taxi light back on, by the way. It's just really nicely done, isn't it? The whole airfield, and the 182 is very good as well. There's a lot that works in it. Okay, things might not react as they should. It's kind of like the needles move, but nothing actually much happens in terms of performance. But it's good fun. Okay, let's put ourselves in front of the big hangar here. Okay, so parking brake on, and we can pull the mixture back, which will use up any fuel left in the lines, and we can turn off the taxi and the landing light. We can turn the beacon light off now, the nav light can come off, the pitot heat can come off, the mags can come off, transponder can come off, the avionics master switch can come off, and then finally the alternator and the battery switches can come off, and we're cold and dark again. Okay, and then we can obviously go and open the door and go and get a bacon butty from the cafe. So yes, as I said, this was really just about the functional side of doing things. Obviously I wasn't doing all the checks and balances of a real pilot, but the point of today was to look at improving that starting checklist really. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll see you again soon.